Last week, the Hawkeyes rocked the Cyclones. This week, bring on the Wildcats. This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to another installment of Incompetent Sports Talk, along with Jordan Loperena and Mike Rabon. I'm Alex Solsma. Before we dive into last week's slate of college football and then this weekend's upcoming games, I kind of want to talk about the U.S. Open. The 6'6" Argentine Juan Martín del Potro won a 5-setter versus Roger Federer. Very exciting. Also, he steamrolled Rafael Nadal to get to the finals. So, Mike, I know you were watching. Tell me what you thought about it.
Well, I was impressed by how he was able to win 2 tiebreaks against Roger Federer. I mean, that's very impressive. Roger Federer, with all the majors that he's won, with all the experience that he has in tennis major championship games, for Del Potro to be able to win those tiebreaks and come through in the clutch and then really dominate that 5th set, I was very impressed by the perseverance that he showed and being only 20 years old to beat probably the best tennis player in the history of the game. I'm very impressed.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think he has won and done it all. Sometimes you see these guys, they might win one major and then you don't hear from him again. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of him in the future. And also, he was down in the first, actually lost the first set, 6-3, then was down a break in the second set. For him to come back and make that a tiebreaker and then to win the tiebreak, I mean, that was very impressive. I mean, I thought after the first set it was over. He looked out of it. And then for him to come and win and beat Roger Federer, who's had a great year. I mean, he's made it to he's made it to the finals of every major this year. And just tennis in general also been very exciting this year. You take a look, 3 of the 4 majors, the championships were decided in 5 sets. So very exciting tennis this year. But now let's move on to college football. I had to get my 2 minutes of tennis in. But last weekend, the Hawkeyes picked up a big victory, 35-3 at Jack Trice Stadium. Now the Hawkeyes have won 5 of 7 versus their in-state rival, the Iowa State Cyclones. Jordan, we'll start with you. Tell me what you thought about the game. Give me maybe your player of the game. Just talk about whatever you want, as long as it's related to Iowa State.
First of all, I think that's the first time I've been a part of the Iowa State rivalry when the game has actually gone the way it's supposed to. Year after year, we have this game won on paper going into the game. In fact, this year, maybe less so than in past years, we had the game won on paper. You know, I don't think anyone was real confident after the UNI game. But we have, you know, it starts with the top. The athletic departments of the 2 universities aren't even comparable. Then you move down and you've got a football program not even comparable. The one thing was it was a lot easier to hate Gene Chizik than Paul Rhodes, because I think Paul Rhodes is going to do about as good of a job as anyone can over there. Chizik, I don't think, even seemed like the right fit when he was there for the couple years he was. But back to the game, you got to give it to Brandon Wager. Kid had over, I don't care how bad Iowa State's defense is, the fact that the kid had over 100 yards. I know you were pretty excited as he's a Keelan product, but he had over 100 yards. And when I talked to Ricky after the game, he mentioned that the running game being established completely opened up the passing game. Ricky looked pretty shaky in the first half, and once we got that running game going, he didn't throw another interception the rest of the game. And you saw Ricky get a lot more comfortable, the receivers get a lot more comfortable, just the offense in general. And then on the defense, you got to give the entire defense the game ball. They were able to contain the Iowa State offense. Not that it's very potent, but we have trouble against the spread sometimes, and we just shut them down. Every time they crossed midfield, either they would get a stupid penalty to bring them back, or we would force a turnover. Our Austin Arnaud, he's a much better quarterback than he played in that game. I almost personally think Iowa State had more pressure on them this year than when they're playing at Kinnick Stadium, because when they're in front of their fans, there's so much pressure. This is one of their few key games every year. And I think the pressure kind of got to them a little bit. They didn't really look like they ever settled in and got comfortable on their home field, and Iowa did. And the Hawkeyes aren't always comfortable at Jack Trice.
Mike, how about that defense, forcing 6 turnovers, 5 interceptions, 1 forced fumble?
Very, very impressive. Holding Austin Arnaud to 79 yards, 10 for 22, very impressive. Very, very happy with Norm Parker's defense. 14 straight quarters, Cyclone fans. That's how many quarters you've gone without scoring a touchdown against that just beautiful Hawkeye defense just running all over the field. But yeah, Tyler Sash, very impressive, 3 interceptions. Brett Greenwood, 2 interceptions, very impressive. And I'd like to see the defensive line do a little more in terms of getting pressure on the quarterbacks. But all in all, very impressed. The defense really set up the offense a lot during this game. I mean, we're going to give the offense credit for 35 points, Brandon Wager having 101 yards. But the defense, getting those turnovers, making the field short, really helped facilitate the offense and get us those points and lead us to a very well-deserved and about time we beat them good. You know?
Real quick, I think one thing our defense needs to work on a little bit is our tackling. There were several times where, you know, if Iowa State, whoever was running the ball, if they spun at all, they'd get an extra yard or two. We were missing a lot of tackles for how good our defense ended up playing overall. And like Mike said, Tyler Sash and Brett Greenwood, we were talking about how great our linebacking core. I think we have the best linebacking core in the Big Ten. We might have the 2 best safeties playing at the same time in the Big Ten as well.
Also, a record, or at least tied. Tyler Sash tied a school record with 3 interceptions. Also, the amount of interceptions that the Hawkeyes had, they had 5. That was the most since 1985. Also, the Hawks were 8 for 13 on third down, which wasn't too shabby, and also 5 for 6 in the red zone. So really, just a great way to go to Ames after that close game versus UNI, to go to Ames, just whoop them. I mean, that's nice. We haven't done that there in a while, so it was great to see that. Hopefully, gives us a little more momentum going into Arizona, and we'll talk about Arizona later. So let's talk about the weekend in general. It was a big weekend for the Big Ten. A lot of marquee games. Ohio State took on USC. Notre Dame took on Michigan. Purdue went to Oregon and played them for the nightcap. So I'll start with you, Mike. What's the Big Ten's image now, coming off a weekend like that? I mean, in those 3 games that I mentioned, they did lose 2 of them, but Michigan looked pretty good against Notre Dame. So what's the country's take on the Big Ten? What do you think?
I don't think the perception's any different than it was going into the season, to be perfectly honest. I think the perception of the Big Ten is weak across the country. We had Northwestern winning by 3 points. We had Michigan State losing on a game-winning field goal. We had Indiana barely winning. And, of course, Iowa took care of business. Ohio State lost a tough one, but I don't think we really changed. Michigan is the big shock. I think people thought Michigan would hang around against Notre Dame, but a lot of people didn't think they would win. So they've really been the bright spot of the Big Ten so far. Rich Rodriguez coming out of a shaky offseason and last season, and coming out and getting two big wins to open the year. So all in all, I don't think it's really changed. But the Big Ten really needs to step it up in some big games, and hopefully we'll, Iowa can maybe do that for the Big Ten down the road.
Yeah, speaking of Michigan, I think Michigan's going to be undefeated when they come to Kinnick. I mean, if you look at their next opponents, they got Eastern Michigan, they got Indiana, and then they go to East Lansing to take on Michigan State, a Michigan State team who lost to Central Michigan on Saturday. So I think Michigan's going to be undefeated when they come to Kinnick. I mean, Tate Forcier looked awesome against Notre Dame. He was 23 for 33, 240 yards, 2 scores. And don't forget about that 31-yard touchdown he had on a 4th down. So, I mean, he's looking really good. But when he comes to Kinnick, he's never going to be played in an atmosphere like that. So I can't wait now for that night game. Maybe those people at ABC knew what they were talking about when they scheduled that as a night game, because all of us are scratching our heads earlier in the season. Why is that a night game? But I can't wait for that now.